What do you get when you combine a Game Boy Advance Zelda game with a mob revenge story that feels right out of the world of Sly Cooper, with Paper Mario's badge system letting you mix and match upgrades to solve puzzles in completely unintended ways, with a Metroidvania underbelly so seamlessly integrated that even people that hate the genre will find themselves giddily checking the map to find new rooms once they realize what this new power-up does for them? You get a transformative experience, able to shed those inspirations as it blends into its own melting pot, the same kind of melting pot as the city featured in Pipistrello and the Cursed Yoyo, genuinely one of the best games of 2025 so far, and one that may well end up being one of the year's truest hidden gems. Case in point, Pipistrello is a game that had completely missed my radar until 2 weeks ago. I received a press email from indie publisher PM Studios, kinda rolled my eyes at the thankfully tongue-in-cheek tagline pushing this as the first Yoyovania, and then saw a clip of the game itself and decided to accept their review copy to at least give it a shot. From the art style to the legally distinct Game Boy Advance model that you can choose to play on, this isn't just a love letter to a handheld you may be nostalgic for, it transcends that inspiration with loads of creative puzzle, platforming, and dungeon designs, a funny story that subverts some of the usual tropes and ends up making for one of my favorite 2D Zelda-styled games, sort-of-Metroidvanias, and really just indie games in recent memory. Rapid-fire boring things in case you're mean and don't want to watch the rest, Pipistrello is $20 and worth that. It's available on every modern system, subscribe or I'll be sad. Okay, cool, that's all out of the way. So the gist of this game, you play as Pipit, a little bat thing, who happens to be the nephew of the titular Pipistrello family, a sort of mob enterprise that controls all of the electricity and energy generation in New Jolt City. Run by his aunt, Pipistrello Industries has levied continually stronger energy tariffs on everybody in the city, pricing people out and intimidating anybody who tries to speak up, and Pipit uses his unlimited allowance to go to sick yo-yo tournaments, where he's usually not very good apparently. Very quickly, a group of 4 underbosses turns on the Pipistrellos, using an incredibly unethical mega battery to murder Pipit's aunt in front of him, taking her soul and using it for some sort of infinite renewable energy source. Only Pipit, being a bit of a sweet idiot, throws his yo-yo out to try and stop the energy beam, and in the process, unbeknownst to the mobsters, his auntie's soul gets trapped inside his yo-yo. Imagine if in Link to the Past, instead of your uncle dying right at the start, he instead became your sword and also gaslit you constantly about the state Hyrule's in to try and convince you that he was right to rule with an iron fist. In this hypothetical, he's the governor of Hyrule, I guess. I don't care. That's kind of what Pipistrello's vibe is as a story, with a bit of Sly Cooper thrown in there. You'll travel from the city square to its 4 separate districts to get revenge on each boss and recover the 4 mega batteries so that you can transfer Auntie's soul back into her body. In each area, you'll get to see the impact of that leader's takeover during this newfound power vacuum. The borough run by slime construction workers runs a real estate racket and starts caving in bits of the city with its endless drilling. One neighborhood is impossible to navigate at first because of an endless line thanks to a music festival that can now run forever thanks to the infinite energy. One leader runs a football stadium and also controls local sports betting and rigs the games using AI. All the while, Pipit's auntie will use these as examples of how she kept the city in line, as Pipit tries to point out the townsfolk that we meet along the way that were suffering thanks to her rule, the shades of gray that led to the betrayal. Don't let me throwing out comparisons to other games fool you, I say those to help you get the unique vibe and mix of inspirations in Pipistrello, but it rapidly and thoroughly becomes a creature all its own. It's honestly an incredibly charming story progression, as Auntie begrudgingly starts to absorb bits and pieces of what Pipit's trying to say, but also as she gets continually more frustrated with him and masks off bit by bit as time goes on. This same transformative ethos translates into the gameplay itself. Earlier I called it a sort-of-Metroidvania, because I think for most of the journey, it's that genre in the same way that Link to the Past can be called a sort-of-Metroidvania. When the game begins, you'll have a choice between 2 districts in the southern plaza. You can bounce between them, go all the way through one neighborhood and finish that mob boss's dungeon before going to the other, however you want to do it. And then once you've gotten both of those dungeon power-ups, you can make your way to the north plaza and pick between the next 2 boroughs. At the surface, I put it closer to a GBA Zelda game than a Metroid for that reason, although as the game starts to open up, it does organically blossom into this addictive search action underbelly. you might not even notice with how slyly it pulls this all off. In each quadrant of the city, there are a number of little side quests provided by characters, stuff like bring them a hamburger from the starting plaza area, or a bunch of apartments you can enter that'll house a heart container or a badge, more on those in a sec. Most of the time, every upgrade you can physically see is behind a challenge solvable simply with your Yoyo's current moveset. Like any top-down Zelda game, you can stab forward with a simple attack to hit enemies or grab objects with the yo-yo, but you can also throw your yo-yo off-string kind of like a boomerang. And nearly every room in this game, whether you're on the streets, in the expansive sewer systems below, in a house, or a dungeon, almost every one has these little diagonal bumpers on the walls that automatically ricochet the yo-yo around walls, over gaps, and through enemies that you may not have been able to reach by yourself. Even with the simplest puzzles, you never stop thinking of both how unique this yo-yo gimmick is and of your own unique ways to approach a room or fight with those bumpers in mind, thanks to the continually creative room layouts. Each dungeon of sorts will give you a permanent yo-yo power-up partway in, such as the classic walk the dog move, only now you're riding it across water, or the ability to punch a wall behind you in midair to extend the yo-yo and push yourself backwards across small bottomless gaps. Likewise, each neighborhood on the way into the dungeon has an upgrade for Pippet himself, like a parry, a coin flip move that tosses your yo-yo into the air and does massive damage if you catch it at the right time with the string, or some inventive variants of your charge attack. The dungeons themselves are actually some of my favorites in any 2D Zelda or Zelda-inspired top-down game in this style because they never follow the sometimes tired formula. There's already a fun vibe bouncing around city streets and through the sewers, not often attempted compared to an otherworldly sci-fi motif or your classic fantasy worlds, so getting a dungeon that's just a big mall or fighting through the catacombs of a football stadium just feels unique right off the jump. Every dungeon ends up lasting closer to the length of a 3D Zelda dungeon as well, far longer than you would usually expect for this style of game, but they also don't overstay their welcome because they're continually teaching you new ways to engage with the game's puzzles or yo-yo mechanics. The later dungeons make sure to continue building on the moveset that you should already have by that point in the game, while I'm pretty sure still being completable if you somehow broke the game and got past the hard gate that splits the north and south side of the city. And that progression really helps these levels break out as, like the rest of the game, this far more transformative experience than you would ever expect on the surface just looking at the game. The bosses themselves are highlights as well worth seeing for yourself. Though I will say the enemy variety in general sometimes does jump a bit far into let's just throw more and more at you, but it still introduces new enemies frequently enough that play with your new powers or force you to rethink your strats. The variety of yo-yo options quickly reprograms what you expect from your usual adventure game puzzle options, as you activate switches or throw keys into a lock by bouncing your yo-yo through otherwise inaccessible gaps. In this game, you don't keep keys in your inventory like you would in your usual Zelda game. Instead, they're items that you have to physically carry over your head. Mercifully, they respawn right next to you if they fall down a pit. What's fun is that you can actually get a few extra keys, I'm guessing as a sort of soft lock safety net, and you can just store them in your safe house for later use in case you just wanted to straight up skip a chunk of a dungeon. As Pippet gains those new moves, that's where that irreplicable Metroidvania satisfaction starts to come into play, as it takes that reprogrammed puzzle brain and further recontextualizes it with each new power-up. Suddenly, you pull up the map and realize there's definitely another room that you didn't know before was in that sewer over there, opening up the pathway for further upgrades without doing that sometimes frustrating or kind of lame cop-out where you constantly see these fruit being dangled just out of reach. You instead get the best of both, being able to solve just about every optional puzzle that you see right then and there if you're savvy enough, while being blissfully unaware for now of entire new sub-areas that themselves will house higher level challenges as you get more things. Once again, that's not the only place that Pipistrello will take and mix its inspirations into this wonderful stew of ideas. Yes, I'm hungry, don't worry about it. Pipistrello has an extensive badge system akin to Paper Mario that modifies your skill set, and it has another upgrade system akin to Link Between Worlds making you rent your items from Ravio. Here instead granting you a permanent bonus like buffing your attacks or giving you more power when you're 1 HP, but also cursing you with a debuff until you've paid off the debt. There are simple badges that only take a few badge points to equip, stuff that gives you more of your health back when retrying a room after dying, for example, or spawning more hearts that also give you money when you pick them up. Others will take more badge points, but will increase your yo-yo's power more and more as it continues bouncing off corners without you picking it back up. There are even some special cheaters badges that are hidden behind the most Metroidy secret rooms that just completely break the game. Early in your adventure, you'll run into two of Pippet's mobster cousins who will then join you in your little safe house. One of them allows you to pay money to build badges from the blueprints you find throughout the world or upgrade badges to an even stronger state. The other gives you those debt contracts for permanent buffs. The catch being that she won't accept any money you already have, instead garnishing half of what you earn from that point on until the debt is paid. It's mostly a passive mechanic, like you don't have to think about it too much outside of the fact that, shit, you lose 2 HP permanently until you pay off or cancel the contract, so now you have to be a little more careful. It's kind of its own difficulty rebalancing in a way, ensuring that you never get too late game powerful until, well, late enough into the game. Speaking of, if the game ends up being a bit too difficult for your tastes, there's a whole slate of difficulty variables that you can adjust to your liking, giving yourself extra HP, modifying damage, or how much money or health enemies drop, stuff like that. Always welcome options for folks that prefer them, and make no mistake, this game can get tricky at times. Some of the hidden optional bosses or challenges would kick my ass at times, often because I was on a very expensive contract and was missing more than half of my health or badge points and had to change my whole loadout or strategy to match. Most of my critiques of Pipistrello are genuinely just kind of nitpicks. I think there were 2 heart or badge containers total where I felt annoyed in the entire game, because again, the ones that are in plain sight that you can see in a room are usually solvable using just your intuition within that dungeon or neighborhood. One was in the overworld somewhere, and to be fair, I did laugh when I realized the stupid roundabout solution they wanted versus thinking that I was just missing a switch. The other was in a dungeon where I just couldn't figure out how to pull off the clear intended solution, so I had to be lame and come back later with a better power and just cheese it. If you want me to really stretch for a critique, I enjoyed the soundtrack and its GBA audio sampling / inspiration quite a bit while playing it. It felt like a really cool throwback. But I had to go back while writing this to remember any of the songs at all. I may just need more time with it, but it's worth mentioning. The biggest one, mainly just because of that Yoyovania marketing tag, is that you can't mark the map in any way, and some buildings like shops all share the same icon, with no description to remind you which one is which, and those 2 details do feel a bit lacking. Like, it's rare that I'm engaging with a feature in Pipistrello that doesn't feel incredibly well thought out. Even when it's not some groundbreaking innovation, it always feels considerate or forward-thinking. Stuff like putting a big green checkmark in front of houses that you've already cleared both in the game screen and on the map, so that you don't have to go back in and double-check if you did or didn't do that one. The map will throw a little exclamation point over doors or sewer entrances if you've discovered them but haven't yet entered. It puts collectible icons in a room once you've seen that collectible so you don't forget where it is. Dying in a room takes a little bit of money from you and then gives you the option to either restart from that same room or go back to the nearest safe house entrance. And at any point you can teleport back to the safe house to further avoid the risk of softlocks. It's all so incredibly convenient, so while the map not letting you mark stuff down really isn't necessary, it's an omission that'll probably bum you out at least once or twice before getting back to your regularly scheduled Indie Game of the Year nominee. Some other fun stuff, there are arenas and shooting galleries, secret boss fights, entire mini-dungeons that you can find out of order, and even in the rooms where you do get stuck, just about every minute of the 16 to 20-ish hours it'll take to 100% Pipistrello feels charming, rewarding, or most importantly, just plain fun. And best of all, between there being room to change up your play order in future playthroughs and a New Game Plus option if you just want to shred the game in 2, it should have solid replay value, even if it does gate off the second 2 dungeons until you've gotten the abilities from both of the first 2. There's probably still a way around that though, I wouldn't be shocked at all. Simply put, you can tell that the developers at Pocket Trap, the same folks behind games like Dodgeball Academia that if you're like me, you've seen all the time but never actually tried, you can tell that they thought of just about every possible angle through clever planning and significant amounts of player tests. There's even a stat screen that covers everything from your playtime with and without all the time you spend in menus, the exact amount of money or hearts that disappeared in fights before you could pick it up, even just the cumulative amount of game time that your yo-yo has been detached from the string. These guys are nerds, and I love it. It's been a packed 2025. There are more games already this year that I've continued thinking about for weeks after beating them than I think I ran into in any of the last few years total. And so many of those games have been incredibly polished indie titles or smaller budget affairs that are just absolutely outshining the big guns and getting more press than ever. I know Pipistrello, being at first glance one of the 1,000 annual pixel art retro revivals, is more likely to get glossed over on visuals alone. I straight up almost did that myself when the publisher cold called me. This review is my way of saying that it would be a mistake for you to gloss over it. A little secret, I'm a Zelda fan, but I usually struggle to get into a lot of the Super Nintendo-styled 2D Zeldas, let alone the indie games inspired by them. I've never really figured out why, it's just kind of a mental block. That I immediately got over the hump and got so absorbed in this one is a genuine testament to Pipistrello's quality. The same goes for folks that might not love Metroidvania exploration. The tongue-in-cheek Yoyovania branding shouldn't scare you away, because this game isn't necessarily one if you don't want it to be, and you'll end up unconsciously wanting it to be one anyway by the end. It's a weird magic trick this game pulls on you, where it can both mold itself to what you want it to be, and sort of mold you into the kind of player it wants you to be. For my money, that makes this one something special, and you shouldn't sleep on it whatsoever. Until next time, stay golden.